All right. Who wants to talk about hurricanes some more? Well, they just won't go away, will they? And what an interesting hurricane season this has turned out to be toward the end. So, just to kind of keep people up to date on what you may or may not actually, in this case, again, see in the news, I thought I'd show you some interesting things, and I'll try and do this in sort of a rapid fire way, hitting some incredible highlights. First of all, look at the number. We've got a tropical storm out here in the Pacific that just cranked up. We've got another one. This is an actual hurricane. Let's see, it's moving 97 miles an hour, and it's hitting the Baja Peninsula. This one, we'll see when I move forward in time, is going to come right up into Mexico here. Will not probably impact the United States, but wow. And then we've got Jose. I'll come back to that one in just a moment and talk about it for a second. And then we've got this hurricane. It's not a hurricane. This is just a low pressure zone, but it's building, and as of now, has a 60% chance of turning into a hurricane, and its path brings it right down below, Haiti and so forth, and then under Cuba, and we don't know at this point, but it might hook up. It might wind up in the Gulf. It could go into Mexico, but it looks like this is the path, and it's going to strengthen in this warm water. Right behind that is another one. So that's five. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think this one's going to have a name tomorrow. I have no idea what the path is going to be, but as all of them track, it'll come this way somewhere to about this point, and then will it go north? Will it come down? It's hard to say. Okay, but anyway, it's out there. And so we'll be hearing about that one because it will be, I believe, an actual hurricane by tomorrow. If we look at the speed, 75 miles an hour. Technically, that is a hurricane. So it's growing. Maybe even later today that will be labeled and given a name. But anyway, let's talk about Jose because everybody's all concerned about it. A lot of people said it was just going to come up here and die and, go away and so forth. And it actually did the loop that a lot of us were thinking it would do. And now what? If you're in North Carolina, South Carolina, should you be concerned? How about New York? It's, some people are speculating it's going to New York. In fact, it's really interesting. I'm going to open up with, kind of the spaghetti model here, I guess. Here we go. So this is a whole bunch of models that combine their data to give you kind of a median, like where is this thing most likely to go. Now, first of all, you notice it's off the coast and going up and so forth, and it looks like it's going to head out and be harmless. But remember, this is similar to the track of Irma. Excuse my phone there, but Irma came further to the left and went north. And you remember, it was supposed to go up the east coast of Florida and then impact, southern Georgia and South Carolina. And it wound up coming further west. And this is kind of a trend. Things are going further west this year. And it came up the west coast of Florida and then up and into Alabama and, gave us some rain in Georgia and power outages and even things like that. So Jose is not as big as Irma for sure. It's going to be downgraded to a tropical storm, and then it seems that it's going to rebuild into a Category 1 hurricane right in this area, and some models are predicting it grows. I don't know if it's going to get much bigger than a Category 1, but maybe as much as potentially a Category 3 according to some models. Now, here's what's missing. On this list of models, the one that's the most accurate, at least in my experience this year, has been the Navy Global Environmental Model, and it's called NavGem. And you notice it's not even here. It got removed from the spaghetti model, and that model actually shows Jose coming right up and into like New York, and up through the Northeast. So it's interesting. I guess they removed it as an outlier, but the next one that's been very accurate this is a Canadian model, and look where it goes. Now it's not going to impact New York so much, but it's showing it goes over Boston or Cape Cod and that kind of thing. So that would mean the storm surges all up there. We get close enough to the coast. In fact, I can show you If I do this, I'm not sure which model this is, but it's an interesting one. I guess it just updated. So I'll run this. I think I'll run this. There it goes. And I'm going to try and pause it, but watch, it's going to go right up to the northeast. Okay. Oop, did you see that? So it came right up and sat on top of Cape Cod and so forth. That would mean big storm surges in New York City and heavy rain and so forth. And then of course Cape Cod and Boston would be impacted as well. So there is a potential, and a lot of the models are showing this kind of thing. So just as a heads up to anyone on the East Coast, we don't know. This thing could curve over and hit the Carolinas. It's really unpredictable at this point. And given the state of global temperatures and things right now, all bets are off. Okay, so anyway, that's Jose. And that's what's going on in the Atlantic. Again, this is the one that we want to watch most carefully, I guess, at this point. And this one will be interesting in the next day or two. But we can move over. Okay, and if you remember in my last video, and I don't know why, I mean, there's like no reporting on this, but it's pretty interesting. In fact, what I'm going to do is I got to move back in time a bit, because there's something I want to show. Okay. That's good enough. There it is. There's another system that developed right over here. And this is, hurricane strength. It's a light hurricane, but it does make it over 75 mile an hour winds. There's 92. And this one has actually pushed into Vietnam, and just died out over land. So Vietnam took a hit. This one, instead of going over Taiwan, it got close enough to give it storm surge and flooding and so forth in Taiwan. And then it turned north. And watch where this one goes. Really quite interesting. Moves north. It moves north. So now we're in the future. All right, there's the 17th. Right over Japan, okay, and we still got a really, really strong storm going here. 85 mile an hour winds, potentially higher or lower, but that's the projected path. So now, what are we talking about? We're talking about Taiwan took a serious hit. We're talking about Vietnam took a serious hit. We've got southern Japan, even northern Japan. Fukushima is right in here somewhere. And then, even China is going to see storm surge from all of this. So that's interesting, and that's going on this week, right? Another thing to look at, I'm going to back up in time because this one dissipated pretty quick, but really kind of interesting. We've got another one. Look at this. Now, at this point, it's a really strong kind of a tropical storm, but and cold air, not pulling out of the tropics. But let's move it forward one day. All right, so here we are on the 16th, much, much stronger and starting to come ashore. Okay, so technically 74 miles an hour would mean, a hurricane. And so we technically have hurricane force winds in a low pressure zone that is pulling into Alaska. And of course, as soon as it hits land, it's going to dissipate really quick. But another one, and this is just tearing up the Aleutian Islands and everything down here where there's volcanoes that are actively erupting and earthquakes happening and so forth. So a sensitive area, not to mention the sensitive nature of the Baltic Sea. If you watch any of the crabbing shows on Discovery Channel and extreme fishing shows, this is where they're at. But very, very cold, and a lot of ocean goods, I guess you could say, from crabs and fish and all kinds of stuff that get pulled down to the U.S. come from this area. So this could have a bit of an impact, right? So where are we at? Taiwan, Vietnam, we've got Japan, we've got, of course, Harvey hit Texas and Houston, which, by the way, a lot of people don't realize there's a kind of an issue there that is not being reported very much, and that is that Houston is absolutely covered up with chemical factories, usually like organic chemicals, petrochemicals, things like that from oil and lubricants and things like that. With all the flooding and 50 inches of rain and the storm and Harvey that pulled through there, a lot of that's been released. Not to mention the enormous number of homes that have been flooded and all the chemicals. All that's going into the groundwater around Houston. So just a little piece of news on that. But we got a hurricane hitting the Baja Peninsula and pulling up into northern Mexico. And remember, Mexico just last week took a hit from the Gulf, and then earlier also took a hit from the Pacific. So Mexico's getting hit pretty hard. We've had Texas, we've had Florida. Of course, the Texas Harvey came back out and hit Louisiana to some degree, and then pulled back up in the United States. And now we've got Jose threatening the northeast U.S. On top of that, we've got two other storms we've got to watch out here. So this is just incredible, isn't it? And for those of you who are still kind of hanging with me on this video and listening, well, here's a question for you, because I was doing some looking last night. Not a question, more something to think about. Last night was looking at some of the climate change news, and by climate change I mean the people who are in the climate alarmist category, Bill Nye, Al Gore, these guys that believe that human contribution to CO2 is causing warming and so forth. I am not personally in that camp. I believe that Earth is warming primarily from the inside. In other words, under the oceans and so forth, and heating up. I am not a climate change denier. I just don't think it's human cause. But at any rate, the thing that kept coming up last night when I was looking at these guys is that they are struggling to sort out why people aren't taking the quote science of human caused climate change more seriously. And I want to encourage you to think about, with all this going on, would it not make their case? They all talk about how hurricanes are going to pick up and extreme weather is going to increase. Why are they not talking about all of this? Could I not convince you that something is heating our planet? And if I'm telling you the most likely suspect is human contribution to CO2, that would almost be believable if I didn't know better. So I don't know why they're not bringing all this up. It seems that it would make the case, but they'd have to explain how we're not past the tipping point in their kind of narrative, I suppose. But at any rate, that just kind of came to mind, so I thought I'd share it. Maybe they will start to mention this stuff and talk about it, but the thing is that you can't just have one hurricane and say proof of climate, man-made contribution to global warming. But I mean, if you have, like, let's say, for instance, 5 cranking up at one time on our side of the planet. You've got Taiwan, you've got Vietnam, you've got Alaska, all these things kicking in. Well, you could make a pretty good case, couldn't you? And we're not hearing that. So I don't know why this stuff is not making the news more, but I hope you find this helpful and insightful, interesting maybe on some level. It is a very unique year for extreme weather. So I don't know if I'll make another one of these videos, but I hope that this is something that you might have gotten something out of, and we'll be back in touch. Keep your chin strap fastened here. This is going to be an interesting hurricane to watch, and if you're on the East Coast, be careful and stay safe.